to this. Welcome back, everybody. This is another episode of the Summa Method podcast in association with a book written by Juliet, which we will mention shortly. We spoke last time in our last episode about the basic structure of that book and about domains. But I'm here with Juliet Creech, our speaker. Juliet, just what are we going to talk about today, and how does it relate to what we talked about last week?
Well, today we're going to talk about identity as a system and how that works and how it relates to last week. Is last week we talked about how we use identity to help people heal from problems. But I think it would be interesting to talk about, well, what is identity? I think that a lot of people start with that question, and you know, uh, well, basically, what is it?
Yeah, well, okay, yeah. So we're gonna deep dive into identity as a system today, and I will be asking you what is identity in this very rigorous and more sophisticated definition. But if you'd like to hear what I, as a layman, think identity is, well, in fact, I'll take a stab at it. I guess I briefly touched on last week, coming from a uh, IT background, the information technology background, where we're involved with a lot of data. I think of identity as the literally like an identity card. It's a trait or a set of traits that no one else has exactly. So yes, I might have brown eye color, and uh, I might have brown color eyebrow, excuse me, brown eyes. Somebody else may have brown eyes, but of all those people with brown eyes, nobody else has a mullet, for example, or my hairstyle. So the combination of those traits, those two traits, the eye color and the hairstyle, uniquely identifies an individual within whatever population, whether it's the human population. And in the field of data and data and systems engineering, I think of that as a primary key, which is not what a layman thinks of. But yeah, coming back to maybe the identity card example, a driving license may have a number on it, and that is unique to that person. Nobody else has that number. So it's whatever minimal information uniquely maps to a single person. But this is a book on self-growth and self-help. So with that in mind, what is identity as far as your book defines it? And maybe before you get into it, could you tell us the name of the book again?
hmm So it's the Summa Method, a gentle revolution in human well-being. And so identity is, in the way that I think about it and use it in the book, is your whole experience of you, of being yourself, what you think, what you believe, what you experience, what you imagine, and what you make of that, what you make of all of these things. So it's the totality of who you are.
And is instantly the biggest difference between that and what I had defined is it seems very subjective to me. So how you perceive the world, that's not something that you can capture factually with some hypothetical machine or a survey of some kind. So is identity subjective, and does that make this more complex than what a normal person would use as identity outside of self-help?
Well, identity is absolutely objective. I mean, subjective. Uh,
Subjective.
yeah, subjective. It is subjective, at least the way that I'm using it. I mean, an identity card is objective. Some things about identity are objective. So I am objectively female. I am objectively a female with dark brown hair and green eyes. And, I'm all the things that I am objectively, right? But that is a very small portion of my identity. My identity is everything that makes me me and not anyone else. And so that is my entire experience, all of my thoughts, all of my beliefs, all of my ways of experiencing all of my memories, everything.
So this is, as I think about this, I think about not only is it a driving license card, but it's a whole deck of cards which each dive into something that's very personal and very subjective. So we're talking in abstract. Yes.
All the cards and the wallet.
Yes, yes, that's I like that analogy. Yes, so there may be some cards that are to do with finances. There are some to do with legal rights, such as to drive. And my wallet may not be the most interesting, so I won't attempt to look for more in there. But yes, it is a set of cards that constitutes an entire existence that you carry around with you. I think that is the common theme there. Now, before we get into the next main part of this that you're going to discuss, there was a question that I thought of when you said this. Now, identity. What, in fact, I'll ask this. I'm going to ask the main question here, which is why should we think of identity as a system? But I'd also like to know why is it important that the identity goes beyond the factual objective and that there is this very personal and subjective. So maybe tell us about why we think about why we model our identity as a system and why it's significant that it's more than just what those objective parameters.
Mhm. Well, it's significant because that's how you experience. You don't walk through life experiencing life thinking every moment, um, I have brown eyes. You don't experience life thinking I have, black hair. You don't experience life thinking I was born where I was born or any of these objective things. You experience life through your experience, through how you take in stimulus from the outside, how it interacts with your memories through your emotional domain, your intellectual domain, your physical body, your physical experience of the world, your idea about relationships, so the relationships you're interacting with, your existential orientation, and your direction in life. All of these things interact constantly with everything that you're doing. And so, in the sense of working with them in the Summa method, we are using this whole gestalt of being because the whole of who you are is how you make sense of the world, and it's also how you cope with your experience. You don't cope with your experience through your eye color. You cope with your experience through all the ways you've developed yourself to be able to navigate the world.
That makes sense. Now, if I think about maybe some of my challenges in life, and we used the example in the last episode as somebody with addiction, but let's take a different example, but something that people maybe can relate to, maybe phone addiction or social media addiction, doom scrolling, which I have my own personal opinions on, but suppose there are people out there who think that's too consuming a part of my life. Is me being a social media addict part of an identity, and are things that are part of our identity good and bad, or are they all just neutral?
So I would say that social media addiction is a symptom of an identity imbalance. So it's an emergent part of your identity. It's not structural usually, although if it's consistent enough, it can become structural because other parts of your identity can begin to integrate it into themselves, right? So your body image is influenced by what you're seeing and how you're comparing yourself to other people, and so it can really become a major part of how you see your body and your relationship with your body, and your relationships a lot of times these sorts of things. You become more disconnected from your relationships because you're spending so much more time on your phone, and less time interacting with people in your life, and so on and so forth.
Yeah, so as part of one's identity, there are very likely to be positive and negative constituents of that identity. Is that the right conclusion to draw in this definition of identity? Such as
There's positive and negative.
imbalance in needing approval from social media, for example.
So that would be another symptom, right? So needing social approval would be another symptom of imbalance in the system. Um, but it's not the imbalance itself. It's
Okay.
happening because of something else.
Well,
So it's happening. Okay.
what would be that imbalance? Basically, what I'm trying to get at is the system. What is that constituent of that system that is beyond our eye color? In the case of somebody who happens to be addicted to social media.
So being addicted to social media typically stems from a low tolerance for stillness, becoming easily bored, not being able to manage lack of stimulation, and becoming too accustomed to constant dopamine rushes and hits, right? So the imbalance is that your regulatory system is constantly activated, and you become dependent upon that, and then you can't deal with less activation. And the thing is that most things in life are not so activating as your phone. They're not so immediate. They're not so you don't get immediate gratification from most things in life. And so the more you become addicted to your phone, the less you're able to function outside of your relationship with your phone. And that causes major problems. It causes huge problems with ability to focus, which can cause you problems with work, with
Relationships.
your relation, with everything, right?
Yeah.
And so the imbalances that are caused by this sort of symptoms, they kind of grow and grow and grow as the symptom becomes more integrated into the architecture of yourself.
Makes sense. And we so that's a negative side of I identity that imbalance. We the Summa method is, as best I understand it, from the realm of positive psychology, and so there are positives we would you would think that would be part of our I identity as well. Could you maybe give one example
Um,
of something positive that is part of identity that beyond eye color?
um, well, I mean, identity is in itself a positive thing. It's it's a natural. You can't really have consciousness without having identity. Um, if you have any higher level thinking, does an amoeba have consciousness? Maybe. Does an amoeba have identity? I doubt it. But a human being probably starts developing identity in infancy. Um, by about a year old, human beings can identify themselves in the mirror, rather and not think that it's another baby, which kind of means that they have an identity, a sense of themselves. Um, so identity is inescapable, and hopefully it's balanced and working well, in which case it's positive. When it's imbalanced, when you are depending too much on one thing and you aren't having enough ways to cope with life, to support yourself in your experience, that's when it becomes negative, I guess. And it's not that identity is negative, it's that you have symptoms that result from imbalances in the identity. Identity itself is just a fact.
Makes sense. Now you mentioned about say a 1-year-old child or an infant that is there. Yeah, so if I'm understanding, an identity is something that's fluid. It's not fixed or static. Now, is it something we are born with, or are you a blank slate when you're born? And throughout each phase of your life, whether you're an adolescent, an adult, a se senior, can you tell us how does identity begin and how does it change throughout our life?
Um, well, it's hard to have very good conversations with infants, which makes this a little bit difficult to understand how identity progresses in infancy. We can only infer from what infants can do. We don't actually know. So to say that first, we know that about a year into life, babies begin to be able to recognize themselves in mirrors. So then we understand that they have self-awareness. And we can assume that having self-awareness means they have some sort of identity going on. Identity, the components of identity are facts. They're inescapable. You cannot be alive as a human being without experiencing living in a body, whatever that body is like. You can't escape it. You also can't escape having emotions. You can cut them off, you can be detached from them, but they are still there. Whether or not you consciously even experience them, they are still there affecting you.
So they are fixed
You
parts of identity.
Yes. The same with your intellectual domain. You cannot escape having a mind. If you're brain dead, you presumably do not have an identity. But if you're brain dead, you're not experiencing life either, right? So you have to have brain activity. If you have brain activity, you have an intellectual domain. I guess well, you relational, you can't escape that because even if you are a hermit and you live in the middle of nowhere, you still have a relationship with yourself. And that's part of the relationship, the relational domain. The existential domain is your orientation to meaning, your connection to anything larger than yourself. And this is also is physiologically based, and it's around at 10 to 12 years of age, you develop abstract thinking and it kind of comes online more then. But even my 7-year-old, she's very interested in existential questions. And it just seems to be a natural part of how human beings develop. And then the purpose domain is, how do you take agency? What are you doing? It's the verb, it's your action domain. And you can't really live without taking action either in some way or another. Um, so these are just inescapable parts of being alive, and therefore identity is kind of just, like I said, it's just a fact of what we are.
That
And
said,
I don't know.
we had said earlier that there are the factual objective components of identity, but there is more than that. So is that the you're not saying that identity is fixed, are you?
Mm-mm.
No.
In
Okay, let's
fact,
talk more about the part that changes.
yeah. Well, so first, can we first talk about why it's useful to think of identity as a system?
Yes, in fact, that was something that I thought we'd move past, but yeah, well, some more elaboration on that would be very welcome.
Yeah. Okay. So the first thing to know is that systems follow rules. All systems follow rules. And
Such
so
as
when you,
trains drive on a track, for example. Is that a rule?
okay,
No.
sure.
Or in a
But
biological
let's say
system?
that
Okay, go on.
So all systems are always trying to achieve homeostasis, right?
Yeah.
They want to be balanced, they want to stay the same. Another rule of systems is that if you affect one part of the system, it will affect all of the other parts of the system. And that is simply just an inescapable rule of systems.
Otherwise, it's not
Um,
really a system. They are separate systems.
exactly. So when you work with something as a system rather than the individual parts of it, you can work with it in a different way. And what we're doing in the Summa method is we're using, in particular, um, this idea that if you affect one part of the system, it will necessarily affect other parts of the system. We're using that to be able to have a different way to resolve symptoms. All right. And the problem that made me want to do this was that people can be hurt by therapy because whenever you try to take something out of a system, it destabilizes the system because the system is dependent on that, right? It has architecture which depends on it. So unless you make sure that it is that the system is supported well enough, when you take something away from it, you're necessarily destabilizing the system and you're risking a crisis. And so what I noticed is that a lot of people in therapy were not well enough supported, and there was some people who were being led into crisis without having the guidance to be able to support them through that crisis, which is dangerous. So I wanted to create something where even the least experienced and the least effective clinician can't really hurt anyone. And so instead of taking away from the system, we only add to the system because when you add to the system and you add good things, you can't really destabilize the system. You can only develop it further.
That makes
All
sense.
right.
So,
So
yeah, go on.
go
I
ahead.
was gonna, yeah, I was gonna say back to this maybe social media addiction. So, if you're a parent who tries to grab the phone and confiscate it from a child, a teenager, you're destabilizing that system, and as a result, who knows what that child could get it into instead? They could get into they may seek out a human connection through other means that could result in some physical safety danger. So what you're saying is, in the case of that, you wouldn't try and take away because there's a real reason why they're searching for that social media engagement, and you're instead saying let's be careful about what changes we make to the existing component, which is part of their d domain or their identity. I think this would be a do
The identity system.
or the system, yeah. But you're saying let's maybe add more people into, or let's maybe give that teenager a dog or something. Would that be a simplistic example of what you mean?
A dog would be a great intervention, right? But also, you would want to. So, first of all, you need to have buy in from the teenager. You can't make other people change. You just can't. If they don't want to change, if they don't want things to be different, you're not going to be able to do it. And even if they're your child, they don't belong to you, they belong to themselves. And you're up against a wall if they're not buying in. So so yeah, getting a dog is great because that introduces support in different ways, but you also need to help them become accustomed to more stillness in their life, to more periods of inactivity, and to be able to build a tolerance for lower stimulation. And you can't do that all at once. It's very small doses over time that you do this. It's just like any other skill, you have to develop it over time.
Yeah, and you said that when you change one thing in a system, there is going to be an equal opposite effect. If you are trying to introduce more stillness into the life of somebody who has that um, perpetual need for motion, for lack of a better word, what might be a what might be as we say, if you're changing something by adding to it, will it be changed somewhere else? Presumably, the intention is for it to be a better change somewhere else.
Mhm. So when you add the stillness, so for instance, if somebody came to me and they wanted to stop using their phone so much, I would suggest that they start very small by spending 30 seconds to begin with themselves, just quietly. And they don't have to do nothing exactly. It's just that you're spending 30 seconds quietly with your mind, engaging with your environment, maybe looking around, noticing what's around you. Go outside, notice what's outside, notice the grass, the trees, the bugs, whatever. Or you can explore your mind. I like to explore questions, strange questions like, um, I don't know, what shape is infinity and what would infinity look like as different shapes or whatever. Um, and so you can just follow things and starting at 30 seconds, just get yourself used to not being constantly entertained by something else other than yourself. Then extend that when 30 seconds is okay, extend it to a minute. And then extend it to 2 minutes and then 3 minutes, so on and so forth. And I would say, you work up to 30 minutes, 60 minutes of being able to tolerate not being constantly stimulated. Now, what this should do is make it easier for you to not use your phone as much because it's giving you development of the skill of being able to tolerate stillness and quietness and not having that dopamine rush all the time. The
Makes sense.
more that you do it, the easier it should be for you to. I'm not saying that you would stop using your phone, but to moderate your use.
Makes sense. As we wrap up this particular episode, is there anything more that needs to be said on this section, and maybe which part of the book that goes into more detail about this for people who wish to reread or to learn about this with a more textual, self-paced um,
Well,
media?
one thing I really wanted to talk about that I think is really interesting about identity is that identity itself is not a fixed, it's not a fixed thing as we were saying, right? It is an emergent property of the domains, of the interaction of the domains. So the domains have a physical part to them. Identity does not. It is the interaction of these domains. It's just like if you walk into a party, there's like an energy there, an atmosphere that it has emerged from the interaction of the people in the party. That atmosphere is like on top of the party, right? And so identity is the atmosphere. It's not
The
the
people in the that are
physical.
physically in the party. Yes, yes,
Exactly.
that makes sense. It's something that gets created from I don't know if this is termed as group psychology, but things that emerge based on that combination that the individual elements would not create in if they were with other elements.
Yes, it's more than the sum of its parts, right?
Yes.
And the interesting thing about that is it makes it much easier to change, much more fluid, right? And that's why you're not the same person you were last year. And you're not the same person you were when you were a teenager, because as your experience changes, your experience of yourself changes.
No,
And
yeah.
go ahead.
I've heard somebody from a mathematical background say we become the median or the centroid of the six people we spend the most time around, and I think that is very much what you're saying in a more articulate or a more detailed way. Would you say that that is one example, I guess, through the relationship domain, that's how our identity is shaped and reshaped?
Um, Not really. I think that it's not literally true, right? So we don't become the median of the six people that we spend the most time around. We tend to become more like the people that we spend time around, um, but we are still ourselves, and we don't change completely unless we have a very unstable identity, which is a big problem in itself. So we would have to have a big discussion about what does that mean and how much do people change um, due to who they're around, and what do you mean by the median and all of that stuff, which we can have, but but I think it's a much bigger conversation.
Yeah, and like we said, as we get older, we become a new person maybe every 7 years. What are some of the parts of the system or the domain that are at play that are causing that constant morphing every era of our life?
All of it. All of it. Everything is everything is
So, for
everything is
example,
changing.
your physical
Your
health.
body is getting old.
Yeah, your physical health in your 20, excuse me, I hope my internet connection is okay. Your physical health in your 20s is very different to your physical health in your 50s, and that affects your identity. You may be somebody with a very active lifestyle based on that. As maybe after we retire, our connections to other people dwindle, and that affects our identity. What other examples as we move through the phases of life do we see changes in our identity
Well, I mean, it's
or in the
in every
system?
domain. Yeah, in every domain, you're going to have changes, right? So your physical self changes as you age. Your emotional self changes quite a lot as you age. You tend to mellow a bit, and your emotions tend to become a little less intense as you get older. If you think about how intense your emotions were when you were a small child, it's very doubtful that by your age or my age, your emotions are anything near that intense. Even if they're still intense, they're just not that intense because we tend to mellow as we age. And intellectually, your mind becomes different. Your brain functioning becomes different as you age. You actually become more intelligent in some ways, and you become less intelligent in others. Your short-term memory declines, but your crystallized memory increases.
Yeah,
So your wisdom increases.
yeah,
And so your relationships change. I've noticed about this is that people either tend to shut down and have fewer relationships, or they expand and have more as they get older. And it seems to be one or the other. And your connection with your existential orientation generally deepens as the older you get. And the closer you get to death, the more you're dealing with existential issues, the more people are dying. The people in your cohort are having health problems, and you're losing them, and so on and so forth. And then your purpose changes. Usually, your sense of purpose, your desire to contribute to others and to the world, your desire to have a sense of deep purpose in your life and to leave a legacy. It grows the older that you get. So this is all of the domains are always moving and morphing with you, and you can look at this developmentally. There's different stages of development. Erickson has great stages of development that you can look through, and so does Piaget. So that can be really helpful. And so there's certain typical ways that we develop, but we're all going to develop in our own ways as well.
Yeah, there are a couple of those that really hit with me personally, or people I know. There are people who may be so career driven with in the purpose early in the early stages of adulthood. At some point, they maybe take a back seat, and their purpose becomes more of being a father um, uh, or a caregiver to somebody else. Your life maybe becomes more about living for other people, and that's why, like you say, leaving a legacy is something that we probably think more about as we age. Another one that really I believe in the intellectual side. When I was younger, I was more into science, like space. As I gotten older, I was maybe more interested in geography. What's more on this planet? And there are probably other people who they become more interested in history as they get older, or arts, or architecture. So that kind of broadening or deepening of our intellectual quests becomes a major element of us. What I find fun age 25 is very different to what I find fun at age 45, and knowing that is probably important to your psychological well-being. Am I right about that?
Absolutely, yes.
Absolutely. Yeah. So anything more you'd like to say on this as we wrap up this episode?
Um, I think that's pretty much what I wanted to cover. And in terms of identity, yeah.
And am I right in saying this is the first one third of your book, or the first one quarter? Which parts of your book is this identity as a system span?
I mean, it spans the whole. I
Before
talk
we get
about
into
it.
the domain part, which I guess is a separate episode.
Um, yeah, so the book is it's interspersed throughout because it's based on identity as a system, right? So identity as a system is
Okay,
is is
it's
is
a
a
recurring
thread that
theme that
runs through the book.
yeah, yeah, and we develop it more and more and give examples, just like we have been doing in this episode. If you could just give a plug to all uh, your touch points online where people can find you and your works, now would be a great time to give them.
Yeah. So you can find more information about the book and some of my writings at my website, which is www.sumamethod.com. That's SUMAMETHOD.com. You can find the Suma Method Substack, which is where most of my writing is. And that's at julietcreech.substack.com. So that's JulietCreech.substack.com. I also have a personal Substack, which is Myopic Dreams at myopicdreams.substack.com, and that's my poetry and other writing. You can find me at LinkedIn at Juliet Creech at Juliet Creech, I think is my handle. And
I believe you're
if
also
you go
on
to my
Reddit and have
it's
done some Ask Me Anything in the past. Could you tell us where people can reach you? Is there a subreddit or a username handle that we can find you at?
I think my handle's Myopic Dreams.
Myopic Dreams. Dreams plural.
Um,
My
so
myopic.
if you go to my Substack, if you go to my Substack, all of my social media links are there.
It's there, great. And by the time our audience are hearing
And
this,
I don't
our
necessarily know them.
yeah, our Patreon should be up and running. That's patreon.com/Suma Method. So once again, www.sumamethod.com, substack.com/Suma Method, or is it sumamethod.substack.com? Yep, it's one of those.
No,
And
it's Juliet Creech .substack.com. So it's JulietTeCreech dot substack.com.
That's right. And the book, at the risk of butchering it, is Sumer Method, The Gentle Revolution. Did I get that right?
Yes, the Sumer Method, A Gentle Revolution in Human Well-Being.
In Human Wellbeing, by Juliet Creech. Thank you for joining us, everybody. We will see you next time. And I'm just gonna